Art, in 1971, I was working for a company that managed apartment units in San Jose, California. My job was to repair and maintain them. There was one apartment building in East San Jose where tenants were constantly complaining about one of the units on the second floor. All the people who lived on that floor said that people were constantly coming and going from the apartment in question at all hours of the night. They also said there were people chanting and screaming came from the unit late at night. The police had responded to the address many times, but no charges were ever proven. At last, my company succeeded in evicting the tenants, and a work order was issued to prepare the apartment for new tenants. So, the next morning, I responded to the unit to inspect, repair, issue cleaning orders, or whatever was needed to rent the unit. As I was trying to open the door, a kind old black lady from down the hall came over and said to me, "Son, don't go into that apartment before you bring a priest to bless it. That place is evil." As I opened the door, I beheld an eerie sight. The walls were painted black, the windows covered with thick, dark cloth. All the light bulbs were replaced with red-tinted bulbs. In the center of the living room, the carpet had been ripped out, and a pentagram painted inside a circle about 8 feet in diameter was in the center of the room. In other rooms, there were altars of some kind, and the remains of small animals that had been tortured and killed recently. After the police had been called, made their reports and left, I rented a dumpster and cleaned the place out. As I was hauling all this carnage out of the building, a man approached me and told me not to defile a sacred place, or I would be in great danger. Not being a believer, I told him unless he disappeared real quick, he'd be the one in great danger. After a long and disgusting day, I went home. Not wanting to upset my wife, told her nothing of the events of that day. The evening, a normal one. Later that night, we went to bed. At about 2 a.m., I was awakened by my dog going crazy and my wife screaming at the top of her lungs. As I sat up in bed, I felt the room was freezing cold. There were 2 pillars of blue light that went from the floor at the foot of our bed to the ceiling. The pillars were pulsating blue light and shimmering in the dark. My wife began to pray. I screamed. Several minutes later, the lights faded away. The next day, I contracted the rest of the job and never responded to that address again. And I'll withhold the name.
Hi, Art.
Hi.
I hope this story is worthy for your listeners, but back in 1981, I was a paramedic in a suburb of Cincinnati. I'm currently living in the Cleveland area, displaced Cincinnatian now. And it was my first suicide that I had ever gone to, and any person who has ever done that kind of line of work, they never forget their first suicide. And I remember getting the call from the station, and we're on our way to the residence, and something told me this person has hung himself, and I'm panicking because I've never seen a suicide before. But when we got to the residence, I walked in the door with my partner, and it wasn't no hanging. The place reeked of gunpowder. And there was a woman standing in the living room, and she pointed up the steps. She said, "He's up there." And I knew what I was in for. And there he lies alongside the bed. And he had put a gun to his head, and he had a note there and everything. And it was just a suicide. And that's the only thing that I can guarantee what happened. And we treated him. I've never been on a suicide where a person was dead when you get there. They're always gurgling on their own blood, trying to breathe, and the blood flows from their head into their throat. And bottom line, the man didn't make it. I've never had one that did make it. Now, fast forward to the year of 2002. My wife, Diane, and I are vacationing in Gettysburg. And are you still there, Art?
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay. We're vacationing in Gettysburg in 2002. And what do you do in Gettysburg but you visit the battlefield and you go to these ghost seances or these entertainment places where they tell you ghost stories. Well, after the presentation was over, we're standing outside, my wife and I, and we're talking to another couple that we had met there. And she starts talking about how the house she lives in is haunted. And one thing led to another. We're talking, and here she's from the same suburb of Cincinnati that I used to work in. And we're talking, and she tells me what street she lives on, and I said, well, I made a run there one time in 1981 for a suicide on Timely Terrace, which was her street. And she said, that's when it happened. And she began to tell me that she was in the process of suing the realtor, the previous owner of the house, because it was haunted. And I said, haunted? She said, yeah, that man didn't commit suicide. He was murdered.
Oh, my God.
And I said, murdered? He was never murdered. It was a suicide. The police were there with me and everything. I'm sure there was an investigation.
Right.
She said, no, that man has appeared to her son. And he looks at the boy and he says, she murdered me. Art, all I can guarantee is the part that I was involved with was that the fact that I went to this house in 1981.
Sure.
The man committed suicide. I did my best, and he didn't make it. And now in 2002, I run into the woman that owns the house, and she says it was not a suicide.
Got it. I'll tell you, I think that in the case of suicides, forget the rest of it. In just even if it had just been a suicide, there's something that so frequently, more frequently than not, seems to cause spirits to hang around. Now, that may reinforce some of what some of you or many of you have heard about suicides, and the fact that you don't get to see your loved ones if you commit suicide. Now, there's a great deal of disagreement about this, but in fact, more times than not, when there has been a suicide, there is some sort of spirit that seems to remain. Now, in the case of a murder, it would perhaps even be more so, and the person murdered, well, I told you the story about the lady who found the skeleton in her attic. They want it known. They want it known. They want to know, they want the world to know what happened to them. And I guess until they find out, they don't move on. They don't rest. They're unable to, that's the only way I can put it. They're unable to be at peace. And until they're at peace, they don't move on. Remember, move to the light. Isn't that what everybody says? Go to the light. Remember John Lear's statement, which actually came from somebody else, which said, oh, no, don't go to the light. The light is a trick. Go to the darkness, said John. That will bug me until the day I die, and I'm faced with that choice. Nevertheless, I think I probably will go to the light, and I recommend that for the rest of you as well. In the night, this is Ghost to Ghost.
I can hear it in your voice.
Yeah, just a little bit of an accent.
Yeah.
The part of the country I'm from is known very well for its ghost stories and UFO sightings and things of that nature.
Uh-huh.
On this particular night, me and a couple of my high school buddies decided we were going to go to this place that was reputed to be a haunted house. We went up there and went inside and was messing around, you know, just goofing off, doing typical high school guy things.
You need not describe them, I recall.
So we went ahead, got pretty bored with that, didn't see anything interesting, so we decided to leave. Well, the house was located out in the country, I guess about 6 or 7 miles from the town I lived in. Mm-hmm. And we started back into town, and there's a long stretch of road called Piper's Gap Road in that area.
Okay.
We started down the road, and it just got real foggy, just like it just sat down, and it's real humid back there. So I figured it was just one of them typical things. It got a little bit cooler, clouds came down.
And it just lays down, yeah.
And it just laid down on the road.
Sure.
Well, while we're going down through there, got to going and talking about people that pick up hitchhikers. And the next thing you know, they'll turn over, be talking to them, turn around, and they won't be there in the car.
Many stories like that.
So we're going down the road, and we come up to, I wouldn't say a fork in the road, I'd say an intersection where another road connected with the road we were on.
Yes.
As we approach it, we can just make out a person standing right on the side of the road, right at where the road connects.
A hitchhiker.
And he's got his thumb out.
Naturally.
Well, we're talking to each other, and I said, why don't we just stop and pick the guy up? And they're like, no, man, don't do it, because we've just been talking about picking up hitchhikers.
That's right.
So I said, no, we're going to go ahead and do it. And I was driving. So I pull the car over. The guy sitting beside me in the passenger seat rolls down the window, leans out and asks the guy if he needs a ride. Well, he just automatically turned back to me, and, his face was just ashen. It just went pale. And I leaned down and looked out the passenger window, and he had already asked him if he had wanted a ride. I looked at the guy. The guy was as white as a sheet, and he was still looking down the road in the direction that we had came from.
Huh.
And he didn't move, didn't make any any sign that he even knew we were there. And the next thing I done was hit the gas and got out of there as fast as I could. And that was, 9 years ago, and it's still, to this day, I think about it, and it kind of gives me the shivers.
And what is it that you think you saw? What was he?
I don't know, because I'd never seen him before, and I come from a pretty small town, and, it was, I guess it was a ghost. That's the only thing I can attribute it to, it was a ghost. It was an apparition.
An apparition. I appreciate the call, sir.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. There you are. An apparition. Many stories presently circulating on the west coast of the country about hitchhikers getting into cars, talking about Gabriel's horns about to blow. Kind of like Vesuvius, huh? Or maybe in concert with. And then suddenly disappearing. Many, many such stories. Where are you?
I'm in Pasco, Washington.
Okay.
I was camping earlier this summer with a friend up in the mountains. There was actually three of us. We went up.
Another camping story. Did you hear the last one?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, not that bizarre, actually. We were up in the mountains, probably 20 miles from the nearest town and 10 miles from the nearest person.
Yes.
Way out on a logging road up on a clear cut. Someplace we used to go, just for the weekend or something where nobody would be around. And
Sure.
we were up there, and me and this girl went walking down the road, and my friend was sitting up by the campfire, and we come back about 10, 15 minutes later, and he's in the car hiding. Thought, no, he's probably got tired and went to sleep.
Yeah.
He gets out of the car and goes, who is the guy that just came by? And I looked at him and said, get real, man. We're 10 miles from the nearest person. Who the heck could come up here?
Right.
He said, some guy in a black robe comes by, looks at him and says, this isn't right. And just walks off.
Meaning, he thought, what? This isn't right that you are here?
That's what neither one of us could understand, because he'd never been there before. In the road that I was on, they had clear-cut it in another direction, so the road was almost grown over, and I remembered where it was. It was one of the roads that trees had now come up in the middle of.
Right.
And we had no idea what the heck he was talking about, and he just kept going on. Somebody came by and said, this isn't right. He just kept going on and on. So finally we just left because he was just going ecstatic about it.
That's weird, all right. That's very weird. And so you just never found out anything more about this?
He still, every time I talk to the guy, he still goes on about this. He still thinks I had somebody up there with us. But where we were, it was impossible for anybody to have found us. It was one of those places, if you were to get hurt or something, nobody would find you.
Well, I guess that's one of those things you're going to have to wonder about your whole life, huh?
Apparently. I have another quick one, if you don't mind.
Very quickly, yes.
I worked in a plant up in a little city up north of here called Lake Stevens. Actually, it's on the other side of the mountains from us.
Right.
And I was in working one night. It was a Prestolog plant, and it was very noisy, so you wear earplugs.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I heard somebody call my voice. There was only two of us that worked in the plant, so I figured it was the other guy, and he was out on the forklift outside. So I went outside, and as I'm going out, he's coming in and said, "What did you want?" There was nobody around. He said the plant had been doing it ever since they had built the plant. It's done that. One person will hear somebody call their name, and the other person will come in as the other person's going to look for the other one. But nobody could figure it out.
Well, it's just, it's in line. Thank you very much for the story. It's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about.
Hi, Art.
Hi.
I'm calling from Merced, KYOS.
Yes, indeed.
And mine's very short, and I don't know if it was a ghost or a real person, but I was up in the Santa Cruz Mountains in a Volkswagen in 1970s somewhere, and with my friend, and we were coming back from a place up in the Santa Cruz Mountain called the Chateau Liberté.
Yes.
And anyway, we're coming down these mountains, and they're all curvy and everything, and as we came down...
Probably Route 17, wasn't it?
Yeah, matter of fact.
I know the road.
Oh, right, great. Well, then it's all rocky at some areas on the side with all tree. I mean, it's all green and all that and trees but anyway, it's a 2-lane road, right? And we're coming along, and it's down one of the downhill ways, and there's this. We come in, and we're kind of talking, a couple girls, and we're talking, and there's this man lying in the road on our side of the road, and he's lying in the road with his head on the white line, and he has on a suit that's like kind of checkered. It's not a normal suit, but it's a suit.
Right.
And we just notice it very quickly. It's a checkered suit, and he's just lying there, and we dodge him at the last moment, and that's all we ever saw of him. It was just a dodge of this man, but he was lying there, and he was smiling. He wasn't dead. He wasn't squished or anything. He was just lying in the road, and we looked back, and we didn't, you couldn't see in the dark, but he wasn't, there wasn't a grimace on his face or any pain or anything. He was just lying in the middle of the road.
Well, you lie on the white line long enough, and you will be squished.
Well, absolutely. But there was like headlights way in the distance behind us, and they didn't make a swerve or anything, so we didn't know. And one other really quick thing is my mother grew up in the hills of Virginia, and she told me lots of stories. They had many sisters, and 7 sisters. Anyway, they were coming home one night, and their mother, through the woods, if you can imagine coming home through the woods at night, but they did it all the time then. And at any rate, they came in, and they were supposed to get home before dark, and they didn't. And there was a little creek-like thing that they had to jump over, and it was small enough to jump over. But when they jumped over, it was dark, and they were afraid of getting wet and getting in trouble. And as they jumped over, a match lit underneath of them out of the middle of the water. Yeah, there are many stories like that from them.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. We go east of the Rockies. You're on the air, Ghost to Ghost AM.
All righty.
Where are you?
I am in Owensboro, Kentucky, listening to WMI.
It's a good place to be. Welcome.
Oh, thanks. Have you ever heard of a ghost fire?
A ghost fire?
Yeah.
Not exactly.
Our railway station here in Owensboro was converted into a pizza place, maybe.
I'm sorry, into a what?
A pizza. A restaurant.
Oh, I understand. Okay.
Into a restaurant.
Interesting.
And I worked there.
Uh-huh.
And there was this huge fireplace close to the kitchen, but it hadn't been used for years. There was no reason to. But you could hear the flames crackling in it and feel heat from it, but there wasn't anything there.
Oh, now that's weird.
Now, have you ever heard of anything like that? I know it happened. Everybody that worked there knew it.
Did it happen?
But we could never come up with an explanation.
Did it happen frequently?
Yes.
I don't think I'd like that.
Well, it was a spooky old place.
It just every now and then happened, huh?
Yeah.
So you could go over near it and warm yourself by the invisible.
You could feel heat from it. You could hear the fire crackling, but you didn't see any fire. It was just there.
No, you're the first.
Well, good.
But
Okay,
this is a place for first. I appreciate your story.
Okay.
Thank you. I have no idea what to say about that. No idea. The manifestations of whatever it is on the other side are nearly endless. You've heard how many tonight?
Good morning, Art. This is Judy, and I'm in Oregon.
Okay.
And I wanted to tell you that we live in a haunted house.
Oh, now you do.
Oh, yes, we do. We have for about 8 years.
Would you turn your radio off for us, please?
Yes. Matt, turn the radio off.
Yes, Matt. Extinguish it.
I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. All right. So in what form of manifestation do you get?
Well, when we bought it, it's actually an antique store, and we live upstairs. And when we bought it, I moved in before my husband did to get things straightened out. And the first day I was there, I went and was cleaning and everything, and it's on the second floor. And I went out the back door onto a porch area and was shaking out some rugs. And all of a sudden, the door slammed behind me. And it's a very large store, over about 8,000 square feet. So I'm up there all by myself. It's getting dusk, and I couldn't get back in.
Oh, boy.
And it faces the river. So I don't have too many neighbors. Finally, I did notice somebody next door about 20 minutes later walking around, and I'm yelling and screaming to him to come help me get out.
Sure.
Back inside. So he did come around and jump the fence, and I had left a door open downstairs. Found his way upstairs, and lo and behold, he says, "How did you get out there?" And I says, "Well, I went out through the door." I have a deadbolt on that door, and he had to open the deadbolt to get me in. So, and that was the first of many, many experiences. And
well, I've always wanted to ask somebody this, and so I'm going to ask you.
Yes.
Why, pray tell, are you still there?
Well, they're not anything but pranksters. I'm not afraid of them.
So it's more of a sort of a pulling tricks on you kind of deal.
Yes, because another incident was downstairs. We have things like, the Jim Beam decanter bottles. We sell those as collectibles. And we went down, and it's on a cement floor. And one morning we went down, and there was 6 of them in a circle on the floor, about 4 feet from the shelf. So things like that happen all the time, and people are there when they happen, too.
I wonder in the paranormal world what a circle of booze bottles means.
I don't know, but they're young people, and I'm sure they don't have ID cards.
Thanks for the call.
Thank you, Art.
You take care. Bye-bye.
When I was about 15 years of age, I lived over in southwestern Minnesota near Pipestone.
Yes, sir.
And they've got an Indian reservation, around that area. And a bunch of friends and I were out camping, and we're kind of around by a small little lake. And during the night, we started hearing, horses and these war cries. And so, we got up, we're out looking around, and we didn't see anything. And I stopped to lean up against a tree to light up my cigarette, and all of a sudden I hear this poop right next to my ear. Well, I took off, all of us scared out of our wits. We don't know what's going on. And the next morning we went back, and I went to the same tree, and I pulled an arrowhead right where I heard it hit.
Wow. You mean it was the thump of an arrowhead hitting?
Yes. And
And that's all that was left in the tree was the arrowhead itself, not the...
Right. The arrow had apparently broken off through the years. And it gets better.
Yes?
We also were, searching around the area, and we found a couple tomahawk heads.
Yes.
A bunch more arrowheads. Actual part of an arrow. And we went and saw one of the tribal men for the Dakota tribe.
Yes.
And they said there was a battle there, and a lot of the Native Americans were slaughtered there.
It was a time flash. I mean, you were in a time flash. They occur. And particularly in areas like that. And for a moment, just an instant, you were part of it.
Either way, it scared the heck out of all of us.
What do you think that means? What do you think that means about death? I mean, because you experienced it, so have many others. You were actually part of it for a minute. I mean, it's like either time caught up with you or you went back in time. I have no way of knowing what, but you were part of it. So what does that say about the nature of death? That we don't really exactly die? That events never really are done with? That they just keep repeating themselves again and again?
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of is it's what the shaman said also. We talked to him also. He took, a couple of tomahawks that we found.
Well, it's something to think about. I thank you for the story, my friend. First time caller line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Happy Halloween, Art. This is Shannon in Las Vegas.
Well, happy Halloween to you.
Yes, I have a true life ghost story for you. I happened to me when I was about 17 years old.
Okay.
I had a little boy, and I moved back in my parents' house, and they just recently moved into a house here in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to give you the address or anything.
Thank you, don't.
And my mother, after I moved into this house, they told me they heard voices. They heard a voice of a little boy, and he was always in the backyard saying, "Where's my grandpa?"
Mm-hmm.
And one night, my mother was coming downstairs to check on me and my son, and she saw a little boy run across right in front of the stairs. She yelled for my father. My father came downstairs with a baseball bat, and nobody was there. Well, about 3 days after this, I recently put my son down for a nap, and I just got done doing laundry, and I folded all of his clothes. I went in there to put a load of laundry into my room, and all of his clothes was unfolded.
Huh.
And so about a week or so after that, my little brother was also living at home with my parents at the time. And my son woke up, and I looked up at the end of my bed, and I thought it was my little brother sitting at the end of my bed, and I asked him to go get me a bottle. And I just glanced back down at my son, and I looked back up, and he was gone.
He was gone?
He was gone. And then my son passed away in November.
I'm sorry.
And I went back home to my parents' house, and I was asleep in bed, and I woke up, and the little boy was standing there looking over to where my son usually slept. He slept with me.
Right.
And he looked at me, and he goes, "Where's the baby?" And I was there and said, "Well, sweetie, I'm sorry, but my baby died today." And he looked at me and goes, "I'm sorry." He goes, "My grandpa died too." And that was the last time I saw him.
Wow.
And a few weeks after that, a neighbor of mine, she lived in the neighborhood since it was built. And I was asking her if a little boy ever lived there. And she told me about how a little boy came to spend the summer with his grandparents. And he was out playing in the road, and he got hit by a car. And they never heard about anything about the house or anything else. But after that, I mean, he was a very friendly ghost. He never really bothered us or anything. He just played, playful little pranks. Now, he was a little boy about 8, 9 years old. And, he used to do rattle silverware and stuff like that. And you'd walk through the house, and you'd feel cold spots to the house or anything. But
yeah.
he was very nice,
Well, I don't know what that tells you, but there certainly are things that remain. I mean, it's not the end of life. One way or the other, things continue.
Yes.
And I'm sure that may comfort you somewhat. In a lot of ways, many of these stories are verification of life after death.
Oh, yes, I really believe. I believe my son's in heaven and everything else. But this little boy, I mean, he was constantly looking for his grandfather, and, you know, I was kind of hoping that someday, you know, hopefully he would find his grandfather and he'd find his way over.
I understand. I very much appreciate the story. Thank you. Sure. We go on. To where and to what, I don't know. Some may remain. But what you will hear tonight will be a consistent thread indicating there is obviously something that comes after this life.
Hi, my name's Patty. I'm calling from Northern California.
Hi, Patty.
Hi, and I listen to you on KDAC.
All right.
And my story's not really that scary. We've had some scary encounters, but it's kind of interesting. Many years ago, I lived with a truck driver named Richard, and he was a real good stepdad to my kids, and especially my oldest son was really close to him. So even when we split up, we all stayed good friends. But he had some problems, and he took his own life.
Oh.
And this was some time ago. But, maybe about a year after that happened, my kids and I were living at an isolated ranch in Colorado, and
right.
It was like an 800-acre ranch on the edge of a wilderness area. I mean, we were way out in the boonies, and we were 30 miles from the closest grocery store. And one night, we were sleeping, but my oldest son was 15 at the time, and he was awake, and he said, here's this truck, this diesel, come up our driveway. And he thought maybe it was a hay truck or something that had gotten lost looking for a ranch or something.
Yeah, diesel is unmistakable.
Yeah, you know, and he's thinking, well, you know, maybe it's a hay truck, whatever, you know. But he said the guy gets out and starts knocking on the door. So he tried to wake me up, tried to wake up his sisters, tried to wake up his brother. Nobody would wake up. He said it was really eerie, because normally I'm a light sleeper, but he said none of us would wake up. So he answered the door, and it was Richard.
You're sure?
Oh, he's sure.
He's sure.
Oh, yeah. He said he came in, shook his hand, sat down and talked to him, and Richard was a big Pepsi drinker. He loved the stuff. And he went out to the truck and got some Pepsis and brought them in. And my son said they sat there and talked for a couple hours and drank Pepsi. And
now, your son said that Richard was full form. I mean,
right. I asked him, I said, well, what did it feel like when he shook your hand, you know?
Right.
And he said, just like if anybody else shook your hand, solid and real.
That's very unusual. Normally, spirits are unable to manifest that physically.
Well, he actually came to him another time after this, but on this occasion, the odd thing is in the morning, you know, he's telling us the story, and we're kind of going, oh, yeah, all right, sure, you know.
Right.
And but we looked, and there was Pepsi cans on the table. And like I said, this is, we were 30 miles from a store that was, even if there would have been one open, you know, at this time of night.
Yep. Well, again, you know, there's something about those who take their own lives. I don't know what. I just know there is something different, and by percentage, there are many more of them than of others, and I don't know what that means.
Yeah, well, he really identified with his job, too, so I wasn't surprised that he came in his truck, you know.
Well, it's good to know there's diesels on the other side.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Take care.
I'm an avid listener to your program. It helps me pass the time on slow nights working the streets here in the Denver metro area. The following incident actually occurred and was documented in official police records with my agency. The names and locations have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. On October 29th, 1993, at 14:30 hours, 2:30 for the non-military, I was dispatched to the scene of a hysterical woman in a court facility under my jurisdiction. Upon my arrival, I found a 42-year-old Hispanic female in tears and extreme emotional distress. The individual was employed as a janitor, had been cleaning a courtroom on the 5th floor, and had just witnessed something that frightened her terribly. I was able to calm the woman and proceeded to ask her what had happened. She described working in the courtroom after a daily session when she felt a chill surround her. She glanced to her left when she perceived someone standing near the doors to the courtroom. As she turned toward the person dissolved and was gone. It was then when the victim became agitated and ran from the courtroom. The apparition was described as a white female with long black hair to her waist and wearing an archaic red dress. I was somewhat amused by the incident. Didn't quite believe the lady, that someone may have been playing a Halloween joke on her. At her insistence, I examined the area and found nothing out of the ordinary. I did feel this would be a great Halloween report for the record, so I decided to go ahead and file a report. As I was leaving the building, I was dispatched on another call to meet a detective in the same building. So I met with a detective in his office, and he reported to me that he had witnessed a strange circumstance in the basement near the elevators. He was somewhat reluctant to tell me all the story, but I was finally able to make sense of what he was trying to say. Apparently, the detective was walking toward the elevators, remember, folks, same building, when he observed, you've got it, a white female with long black hair wearing a red dress standing at the elevator doors. As they opened, the woman stepped inside. The detective called for her to hold the door for him. She did not. It closed just as he got there. The detective then pushed the call button for the elevator. The doors immediately opened, and nobody was there. The detective stated the elevator had not moved. There was no sign of the woman or any way she could have exited the elevator within the time allowed. Knowing that police officers are often given to pulling pranks on one another, I suspected I might be getting set up. But I went ahead and added the detective's statement to that report. When I returned to the station for end of shift, I showed the report to a fellow officer who studied this kind of thing. She was very interested, and I was surprised at her behavior. She called a friend of hers. We all went back to the courthouse and entered the courtroom. It was now midnight on the dot when we sat in the room in question. My friend sat on one side of the room, I on the other, supposedly to keep from interfering with their procedure. I was very unaware at this point what to expect. I still thought I was getting set up. All of a sudden, the temperature in the room dropped drastically. I felt a tingling on my skin. I looked at my partner and her friend, and they seemed to be in a trance-like state. I was getting a little frightened when they said, "She's here." And I left the courtroom by the nearest door available. I didn't know if there really was something there, but I was of the mind to wait outside the room. Suddenly, my partner and her friend opened the door to the courtroom and asked me back inside. After some considerable argument, I returned with them. Never saw anything, but I felt a presence near me, and I asked my partner what the thing wanted. I was told the spirit wanted to tell or ask me something. At this point, I really was frightened. So I asked, what does it want? I was told by my partner's friend that the spirit wanted to know if it was all right to leave. I looked at my partner, and she nodded to me, and so I told the spirit she could leave and everything was all right. As suddenly as it appeared, the cold, the feeling of presence disappeared. I was completely in awe. My partner later told me that the spirit was looking for someone to tell it was okay to leave this world and go on. I'm not sure what really happened, but I do know there was something there, and that I will never again scoff at the fears or perceptions of another human being. That is a Denver police officer, whose name I will withhold. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hi.
Hi, this is Ron from Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Hello, Ron.
I called about a week ago about my New Guinea singing dog, and tonight I have a story about my daughter.
All right.
Okay, when she was about 4 years old, we moved to the Kansas City area and bought an old two-story house there. And shortly after moving in, the neighbor's house was broken into, and the police later came and asked if we had heard or seen anything.
Uh-huh.
After they left, my daughter said, "Daddy, my friend Daggett said he would never let bad people in our house." And I asked her who Daggett was.
Yes.
You know, am from California originally. I know there's a Daggett, California.
Yes, there is.
And she had never been to California at that time, and I don't know where she came up with that name. So anyway, I asked her,
Who's Daggett?
Who's Daggett?
Yep.
She said that he lived in the house, and he'd been there for a long time. Well, my wife and I just wrote that off, as childhood imagination.
Imaginary playmate.
Right. Well, anyway, we lived there about 4 years, and we constantly heard things, especially in the basement. And our washer and dryer were in the basement, and it got to where my wife wouldn't go down into the basement unless I was in the house, and then at night she wouldn't even go down at all unless I went with her. So
I
just got to where I did the laundry.
Right.
May have been a trick on her part.
A trick?
Anyway, my daughter would occasionally run to the basement stairs and yell, "Be quiet, Daggett," and the noise would stop. Well, anyway, this was, like I say, just written off as an old house that creaked in a child's imagination.
Sure.
But one night, I went into her bedroom to read her bedtime story, and we had a large, overstuffed chair sitting next to her bed, and I sat down in the chair, and it was like I had walked into a meat locker. I mean, it was so cold that it took my breath away. And my daughter screamed, "Daddy, get off of Daggett."
Oh, my.
And from that point on...
Sir, how old is your daughter now?
Well, I'm... Like Paul Harvey says, this is the rest of the story.
All right.
My daughter is a freshman at a university here in Oklahoma that I won't give you the name of or identify her, but anyway, she is president of the university's pagan society. She's a witch. She is a member, or whatever you call it, of the group called Wicca.
Yes, those are witches.
So she is all excited right now. She just called me about an hour ago. The big goings on. That they're having big overnight bonfire, and
I'm sure it's a big day.
I don't.
It's a big day.
I don't even ask questions about what's going on.
Do you ask? Do you ask
do
about?
Not know.
I understand. Do you ask about Daggett ever?
Well, that was funny. I asked her tonight, and...
Well, listen, we're not going to have time. I'm at a break point. That's a hell of a story, though, sir, and I appreciate it. Daggett in the chair. No, thank you.
Just when I thought I was crazy, a ghost began visiting me every evening. I could not tell anyone because they thought the stress of the accident caused me to imagine things. A visiting ghost arrived with a bump in the night. This began the signal that my ghost was arriving. Fear gripped me. I'd hang on to the Bible in terror. Over the next few months, I realized whatever I was seeing was not going to harm me. My fear started to disappear. I accepted the ghost for what it was. My journey of insomnia began. I'd go to bed, same time every night, lie awake for the bump in the night to come, watch the ghost come through the window and float around the room. When the noise came from the ceiling... When that started, the ghost would cry softly and go through the ceiling. This would go on for a few hours every night till dawn. I decided if I was crazy, then so be it. In desperation, I sought an answer. My answer came to me one evening. I decided to set up a video camera in the attic and have the feed come through to the TV in my bedroom. I'm the most fortunate woman in the world, as I have people that love me. I asked my son to help me do this. He doubted me, but agreed to help set up the video because I could see he loved me and wanted to help me resolve whatever I was hearing. The first night came with the video in place in the attic. The ghost arrived, crying and weeping, floating all around the room. When the noise started, I jumped up and switched the video camera and TV on. Within minutes, I saw large rats. I saw very large roof rats. Gosh, why did I say cats? Running everywhere in the attic. I sat on the floor crying, knowing that I was hearing something very real. I felt the ghost touch me as a brush as dawn came. The first night, I forgot to push the record button. Next evening came. I was like a little girl with a deep secret, and I could not tell anyone till I had solid evidence the next evening. I did push the record button. I called everyone to come and see my video of the roof rats. Next, I phoned an extermination company. The first two companies I hired after visiting the attic left refusing to do the job. Well, I did finally find a company to come clean the attic and fix the hole in the roof. When they were cleaning the attic, they found the bones of a woman. I knew this was the ghost visiting me. I knew this because after the discovery, I didn't see the ghost again. 20 years ago, her children, this woman's children, thought she had run away with someone else. It just wasn't true. Her husband had murdered her and put her in the attic. Her husband had died years before. Her children were amazed to find out what really had happened all those years ago. The exterminator company that cleaned up the attic told me later they had felt a presence with them in the attic, but they decided it was not bad, so they kept on with their job. They knew my story and wanted to help. When I purchased the house from the previous owners, they had left me a bundle of sage to burn before I moved in. Though they wouldn't admit it, I believe the ghost had visited them, but they chose to move. It took me 2 years to recover from the stress of hearing and doubting myself. In the end, I'm much stronger for the experience. I decided to learn to remote view because I needed some tool to help me. I'm sending you this story because not all ghosts are mean and nasty. I believe that ghosts put the hole in my roof so the rats would get in and the attic would be investigated. All the best, Debbie. I thought that was a good one. So in that case, obviously, the woman wanted her remains to be found. And while it seemed rather conventional with the rats, can you imagine the shock? Can you imagine the shock when you find bones? My God.